At 7:13 in the morning, I was standing on my porch in pajama pants and socks, twisting in the last screw of a new deadbolt when two squad cars rolled up and a woman with a visor, pearls and a clipboard started yelling through a megaphone. "Step away from the door. That entry is under association control." For a second, I thought I was still dreaming. I waved at her with my screwdriver, thinking this had to be some kind of mistake. Then she pointed at me like a TV game show host and shouted, "Arrest him. I run this neighborhood." Yeah, that's how my morning started. My name's Nolan Pierce. I write technical manuals for a living, which means my life is supposed to be boring, predictable, and quiet. I live in Cedar Hollow, a suburb so perfect it feels mass-produced. The kind of place where the grass height is regulated and everyone pretends to love each other at block parties. But behind every perfect lawn is someone like Mara Yates, our HOA president. Mara isn't just any HOA president. She's the kind of woman who power walks at 6:30 a.m. with a fitness tracker and a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. She wears floral blazers like armor and carries a clipboard like a weapon. I'd crossed paths with her before. She once fined me $200 because my doormat said, "Go away," instead of "welcome." According to her, I was projecting negative energy into the community. Another time she cited me because my car was parked in my own driveway facing the wrong direction. Apparently, visual harmony required all cars to face the street. Page 47 of the bylaws. So when my front door lock started sticking a few weeks ago, I decided to replace it myself. Easy fix. I even emailed the HOA out of courtesy just to let them know. Mara replied within an hour, "Key must be filed with board for emergency access purposes." I laughed, sent back a smiley emoji, and attached a state statute about unauthorized key retention by third parties. I figured that would be the end of it. But with Mara, nothing is ever over. The next day, she emailed again, said my lock wasn't in compliance because it didn't match the approved bronze pallet version 2. I literally went to the hardware store and looked at every deadbolt. They were all bronze, every single one. I sent her photos as proof. She replied that my tone was becoming problematic. Then she complained that my doorbell camera was causing surveillance fatigue for neighbors. She said it made people anxious. Funny thing, the camera caught her on video standing in front of my house with a measuring tape muttering to herself about continuity. At one point, she literally asked the doorbell if it had the right permits. Then came her masterpiece, an email claiming my failure to give the board a copy of my key was a community safety hazard. She referenced a fake fire code and described some imaginary emergency scenario where board access could save lives. I realized she just wanted to play queen of the neighborhood with keys to every castle. A week later, flyers appeared in everyone's mailbox. Locks must be registered. The flyer had a frowning padlock clip art. She even scheduled a porch inspection without asking me. She showed up with her inspection crew tape measure in hand, lecturing me about continuity of entry aesthetics. Apparently, my doorknob was 7 inches too far left. I shut the door in her face mid-sentence. The next day, a guy in a reflective vest knocked on my door. "HOA locksmith," he said, handing me a card printed on a bingo card. I closed the door. No words. Then I went online and ordered another camera. If Mara wanted surveillance fatigue, she was about to get a real show. That Saturday morning, when I was just trying to finish the final deadbolt installation, she showed up again. But this time, she brought back up. 3 volunteers in matching visors, all clutching clipboards like they were deputized. She stood at the end of my driveway, dialed 911, and announced loud enough for the whole street to hear that there was a break-in in progress. Minutes later, 2 police cruisers screeched up, lights flashing, neighbors peeking through blinds. I just stood there with a screwdriver in my hand, completely stunned. The officers asked what was going on. Mara stepped forward like she was accepting an Oscar. "I run this neighborhood, officer," she said. "This man is altering a controlled access point without HOA permission." She claimed she needed a master key for emergencies. The officers exchanged looks. One asked for proof of authority beyond the laminated badge she wore that said President in Comic Sans font. Then she made her fatal mistake. She bragged that she'd tested my doorknob previously to ensure compliance. That little sentence caught perfectly on the officer's body cam was all it took. They asked her to repeat it. She did loud and proud saying spot checks were part of her job. The officers turned to me. I had everything ready. A folder with my property deed, the HOA bylaws, and an email where Mara literally threatened weekly wellness checks if I didn't hand over a key. They read it. Their eyebrows went up in perfect synchronization. The senior officer looked at Mara and said, "Ma'am, you cannot demand keys to private homes. You cannot touch another person's doorknob. And you definitely can't call 911 because you lost a power struggle with a deadbolt." A city inspector who happened to be nearby came over, confirmed that my lock color was fully compliant, and shook his head in disbelief. I filed a harassment complaint right there on my porch. That night, I applied for a temporary restraining order. And just like that, the neighborhood exploded. By evening, my phone was blowing up. People I barely knew were messaging me with their own Mara horror stories. Towed cars, fines for wind chimes, citations for having non-harmonious garden gnomes. Turns out I wasn't her first victim, just the first one to push back. 2 weeks later, we were in district court. Mara showed up dressed for battle hair sprayed to perfection heels, clicking like gunfire, and carrying a trifold presentation board titled Community Security Initiative. The bullet points were written in glitter glue. She had printed photos of everyone's doorknobs, each graded like a high school project. Mine had a giant red F. She'd even laminated a fake certificate naming herself Chief Security Liaison, signed by herself. My attorney, Jace Delgado, a calm, razor-sharp property lawyer, took one look at the glitter board and smiled like she'd just been handed a winning lottery ticket. When court began, Jace stood and pressed play on the body cam footage. The judge's face froze mid-expression as Mara's voice blasted through the speakers. "I run this neighborhood." Then the part where she proudly admitted to trying my door handle multiple times. The courtroom was dead silent except for the sound of Mara's own voice echoing through the speakers. Jace presented the bylaws tabbed and highlighted. Not a single word about key retention. Then she showed a letter from the city attorney warning HOAs that demanding house keys could result in massive liability. The judge, an older woman with glasses perched low on her nose, stared at Mara and said, "Miss Yates, running a neighborhood is not a thing. It is not a title. It is not a power you possess." Mara tried to speak, but the judge cut her off. "I'm not finished." The verdict came faster than I expected. My protective order was granted for a full year. Mara was fined $1,500 for false reporting and ordered to take a 4-hour class titled Proper Use of Emergency Services. The HOA was hit with an injunction banning any key retention policies in the future and forced to refund my so-called lock inspection fee plus my legal costs totaling $4,200. When the judge read that number aloud, Mara's face went pale. Her hands gripped the table and her glitter board, her precious masterpiece, slid off the easel and smacked the courtroom floor with a thud. The sound echoed like a closing chapter. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there realizing how close I'd come to letting her win not legally, but mentally. For weeks I doubted myself, wondered if maybe I was being too difficult, too defensive. There were nights I almost caved, almost handed over the key just to make it stop. But that moment, watching her crumble under the weight of her own arrogance, I knew I'd done the right thing. Control isn't safety. Compliance isn't peace. Sometimes the only way to protect your home is to lock the door yourself.